Thanks for joining us for another episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. We're back with our NFL Draft winners and losers episode. We've gutted out 3 days of the NFL Draft. We've had some sleep after our night one live stream of the first round of the NFL Draft. And we're here just to sort of see the lay of the land, talk through who we think's done a great job, who's got themselves better, who's a step behind the others, and who maybe didn't have a good 3 days in Green Bay. I am, of course, joined, as always, by Joe and Byron. Gentlemen, how was your NFL Draft weekend?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Loved our stream on Thursday, all the guests we had on. I honestly think it's one of the highlights of the year, the season for me. I love just 4 hours of just shooting the shit, as they say, and get to see all these players. The draft's always been one of my favorite events, period. But yeah, getting to do it together, I think is genuinely one of my favorite things we do of the year. Definitely one of my favorite things we do of the year. Yeah, I just love it. I think it's a real fun 4 hours. Doesn't matter how many people watch or interact or anything else. Just get to hang out with you guys and all our guests, and yeah, it makes it so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, it is. It's a long. It is a test, isn't it? 4 hours live, keeping it going, filling it with actual worthwhile analysis. It's not easy to do. So yeah, I'm won some money as well, which is always good. Good start to the year. Joe, how are you feeling after the draft weekend?
Yeah, it's probably the best time for all fans, where everyone's like, we've nailed our draft pick. All these players are going to be great, and looking forward to the season. So it's it was really good. I think it's a weird one this year. Like trying to come up with the winners and losers. There weren't as many losers as of the past few years. I think everyone's done well. But like I said, even in the first round, if 60% of the players turn into good players, it's a good first round. So they're all not going to hit. But with the exciting phase where it feels like everyone's done well. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get into where our analysis is of who we think did good and not so well.
Yeah, starters, not stars, I think was kind of the tagline for this draft. So yeah, a lot of depth for a lot of rosters, but not too many blue chippers, as we discussed. Maybe 4 or 5 of them, if that. I suppose let's just cover off a few bits of news. I said there was only one bit to start, but actually a couple of other bits have sprung to mind. One might fit in with the actual winners and losers bits. But the first bit, Washington Commanders are returning to Washington. They've been out of DC for close to 20 years, out in Landover, Maryland at FedEx Field. But now an agreement's been made between the team and the District of Columbia, the government, to build a new stadium, totaling $4 billion. Great that the Commanders are going to be heading back to, the city that they're actually from, rather than playing out in the sticks. Just continuing the wave of nothing but positive things happening since Dan Snyder disappeared.
Who would have thought? It's really good to see, though. Obviously, the division rivals of mine and yours, Paul. But I don't know. I've always felt Washington are one of the good franchises in the NFL, and with Dan Snyder at the helm, it was tough to feel that way because he was a piece of shit and he ran them like a gentleman's club would be polite, very badly. And he's an awful man. So, I think it's good to have Washington Commanders here with a non-slur name and be back being a positive for the NFL, as much as that might not make things easier for Dallas. But, Dallas have an easy enough time making things difficult for themselves. Might as well have some more good teams in the NFL while we're at it.
Yeah, I think the deal is to revamp the land that RFK Stadium sat on previously that they played in up until 96, which is close. I think it's like 3 kilometers outside of the city itself. So much better than where they are in Maryland currently. And a full regeneration of the area. Their Commanders contributing, I think, about $2.7 billion, so almost 3/4 of it, and the city investing just over $1 billion. But it just all fits with kind of how things are going in Washington with the Commanders.
Yeah, let's be honest, that stadium was a bit of a trash pile as well. There was constant videos of it, sewage, all that kind of stuff. So great game to literally
shit on the fans. Yeah.
I think so. Jalen Hurts be happy that it's been changed as well after nearly getting crushed by Eagles fans there. I couldn't believe it was only built in 97.
Yeah.
It feels very rickety.
Yeah, and then so many injuries on that field as well recently. It almost feels like there's a big injury every season or so because of just how bad the field was there as well. So yeah, positive move for the Commanders. The other bit, slightly out of left field, because I only saw this before on Twitter. Did you see Derek Carr at church?
Yeah, I've seen an incredible tweet as well. And it's like, imagine you're a Saints fan, went to Vegas to enjoy the draft weekend. You've had a 3-day smashing it. And you think Sunday, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to go to church and repent. I'm going to, be a better person. And you see Derek Carr there bitching about a shoulder injury. And I'm not sure whether I would never sin again or if I'd never stop drinking. Like, I think it's 99% I would never stop drinking and I would be leaving that church immediately.
Yeah.
It's such a Derek Carr move, though.
Yeah, a truly incredible video. I've not watched it all because there's the full 2-hour church service. If you're interested in that, watching it. But yeah, I've not seen the whole. I've seen a couple of clips of it. But yeah, I don't know if this was just his way of trying to hit back, and I think he was getting a bit fed up of people maybe who he thinks opinions aren't valid, which was everybody but God. I think is how he put it. That he didn't care about their opinions. But really, really sold the fact that he really was injured and he's got an MRI to prove it.
Yeah, the cars, especially Derek, I think have always been touchy. I remember around the NFL thing back in the day. I don't know if you remember this, Joe. I think you're big around the NFL fan as well, where they ended up getting David Carr. I think Lindsey Rhodes brokered it of like a peace talk because Derek Carr blocked Dan and Greg, I believe, because they criticized Connor. I was going to say Connor Cody, but that's a defender. The Connor Cook, maybe. They had a backup quarterback in the playoffs, and he was terrible because he's a backup quarterback. It wasn't his fault, but they were saying that he's bad. They're not going to win this game. So Derek Carr blocked them on Twitter. And he's always been that way, Derek Carr. He goes around block. Ben Roethlisberger used to do the same. Like, if you criticize him or his team on Twitter, not directly, he would just search for it, and then he'd block you. It doesn't speak to me as someone who's robust, should I say. Ricky Gervais is the same. Like, it feels like insecure little men who have to search for people who don't like them to get angry about. And I think Derek Carr, if he went to like a New Orleans or Louisiana church service and like opened himself up there, I think it would have went well for him. But I think it's just classic Derek Carr to go and do it in Vegas where he's safe, where he's liked, where there's no pressure on him. He's not someone I would want leading my football team. He's not the worst quarterback in the world, but like he's not a leader.
Yeah, things are interesting for Derek Carr in New Orleans. If he even ever returns there, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
I'd put the under. I'd take the over under 0.5 games started by Derek Carr, and I'd take the under.
Yeah, there's another reason for him not to go back as well, which we may touch on in our winners and losers part of the draft. I think that was it. The other bit of news I think we'll save because it is draft related and also kind of hilarious. But I suppose we'll go into the draft. So we winners and losers. I think we've got one. We'll have one each, probably some others to touch on as well. One loser each, and then chat through. Gents, who wants to kick off? Anyone got a burning desire to go first with who they thought? Do you want to start with winners or losers? Do you want to end on the lower losers or end on the high of winners?
I think start with winners, right?
Start with winners, yeah. Byron, do you want to go first then? Who's your kind of winner? Who do you think was the biggest winner of the weekend then for the NFL draft?
Yeah, I have a few, but the main one for me is kind of a player on a team, but it's the same team that the player plays for. Drake May, the New England Patriots. As said in the build-up to the draft, I think I would have taken Armin Membu as my tackle, but they see more in Will Campbell than I do. And I think they've got a very, very solid guard or tackle. So you can't really go wrong. I think it's a very solid draft pick, even if I, like I said, would have went with a slightly different player. But ultimately, I think getting that O-line settled, Travion Henderson is an absolute pass pro. He excelled at it in college, great receiver, could play all three downs. I think he'll double up with Ramondre. I don't think Ramondre is for the chopping block immediately, but I think it's probably it will be his last contract in New England unless he really shines this year. I wouldn't be surprised if teams call about him, but I think it's a great double-headed attack. One of my favorite picks in the entire draft was third-round pick 69, Carl Williams, who I'd actually said New England should maybe take over at 38 while we were watching it live. They didn't need to. They got him at 69. Absolutely blazer, dynamic. They've got a lot of weapons that do similar things in New England. Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Stephon Diggs even nowadays, that kind of underneath slot target. Hunter Henry's your big lad. Carl Williams has got speed to burn. In the entire draft class, he had the most 20-mile-an-hour plus plays of any position in next-gen stats of any player in the draft. And then they've got Jared Wilson, 95th pick of the third round, the best pure center in the draft. Some people had him tipped as an early second round and maybe sneaking into the first of the pure center. And to get him, towards the end of the third round, I think is just great value. The rest of the draft, I'm not going to say I know too much about, but just hitting those 4 picks boosts your floor so much on offense. And I think Henderson especially, but Henderson and Carl Williams boost your ceiling an awful lot too. We've seen what Drake May was last year, making chicken salad out of chicken muck. And I think the sky's the limit for Drake May. I don't know if they're a playoff team this year, but I think everything they've done this weekend indicates that they've got a lot better.
Yeah, they're prioritising it. And I don't know if we maybe didn't necessarily expect it because of with Vrabel taking over. We thought they might have had, certainly more of a mix up front in terms of, balancing the defense as well, because we expected the defense last year to be a lot better than it was, and it still needed some help and reinforcement. It obviously got a lot of that in free agency, but we haven't seen it too much from the draft. They really have focused on offense, and those first 4 picks really, have given them a platform to build on. How are you, Byron? I love Carl Williams. I think he's going to be a great pickup, and I think it's pretty good value at 3.69. So I'm interested to sort of see how they work, but that really does help Drake May. And yeah, like I say, I think it's front loaded. They've got 4, 3 for sure, 4 maybe players there who are definitely going to help them, going to be starters, and going to sort of have a huge positive difference on that offense. So yeah, I think they were in a much better position where they were, and it might not take them as long to get back to winning ways. Not to that extent, obviously, but to get back to winning ways, given how free agency and the draft's gone for them. Joe, what do you make to how the Patriots navigated the draft?
Yeah, I think they just needed to do, what they set out to do. This is how you take a team from, being one of the worst teams the last couple of years, and you got to do it through the draft, getting all these young players, picking up players when they do fall. So yeah, I agree with everything what you guys said. It's new regime and everything. So they've hit it well, and they've got to do this probably the next 2-3 years to get back to where they want to get to. But it's a great start if these picks work out.
Yeah, I think probably the only bit maybe was, could they have taken Mason Graham at 4? And I know obviously it wasn't because they'd addressed that in free agency, but when we're talking about kind of the blue chippers, I think Mason Graham might have been one of those, arguably. And obviously ended up going the next pick to the Browns at 5, and could they have done that and then maybe found some O-line help later on? But they obviously really, really like Campbell. I think he'll be great, probably inside, but yeah, they're in a really, really good position. I think they had a really, really strong weekend, and particularly day 2 with around 2 and 3 picks. I think they've hit gold there, and yeah, Henderson and Williams will be fantastic for the Patriots for an offense that was very pedestrian last year. That's kind, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, sub-pedestrian.
Sub-pedestrian. Love it. Excellent. Good start. Joe, I'll let you go next, and then I will try and scramble around if you take mine.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take one which has not been on. I've not seen it lots of places, so I'm not going to go for the obvious. I'm going to go for the Carolina Panthers, actually. And this is because what they managed to do day 2. Obviously, everyone was a bit up in arms when they took T-Mac at wide receiver. We had him rated fairly highly. Some people had him, the number 1 wide receiver behind Hunter. Some people had him 6 or 7. So obviously, how he performs will depend how this draft goes. But getting Nick Scotton and Princely, 2 edge players in the 2nd and 3rd round, they've hit that need. Like we were sat here on night and day 1 being like, why have they not gone defense? They need edge rushers. They need everything on defense. It was one of the worst. But to get 2 players who, I know Nick Scotland was mocked a lot of times in the 1st round, and Princely, I'm not going to try his last name. I'm sure Byron.
Come on, Joe. Come on.
Oman Million? Oh, God knows.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, I think getting them in the next 2 rounds when they were drafted, when they were mocked, end of the first round into the second round has worked out massively. You've got that big body wide receiver now, to get that. So I think how it's worked out this way, rather than getting one of them edges, Walker or Michael Williams, for example, and then get one of the wide receivers on second and third year. I think this way around could work out because how good them to be, and they let the players drop to them. Obviously, going for ETN fourth round. Now they've got four running backs on that roster, but obviously depends with the injury.
Obviously Brooks this year.
Yeah, so if Brooks not here that year, so he's that third running back behind Chuba Hubbard and
Rico Dowdle.
Cowboys. Dowdle, there you go. But and then I do like the Mitchell Evans tight end from Notre Dame as well. I think getting that kind of tight end to complement that offense, where he's a true blockage tight end, but he does have some plays where one-handed catches every game. So he could be one of them, fifth rounders where we're talking about next year. Like, wow, that's an absolute steal. So I liked what the Panthers did. In general, that it worked out for them after, especially today one.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I do think the Panthers had a great draft weekend, but I've seen them be fairly criticised. I've seen them being criticised, not failed, but I've seen them being criticised a lot and maybe put down towards the bottom of the teams in terms of how they did for the weekend. I don't understand why. Once it got to 8 and Ted McMillan was there, they need a 1. Ted McMillan is a 1. Bryce Young needs some more help, from a receiving perspective. They traded back into the first round last year when they didn't have a first round pick to get Leggett. Didn't really see too much from him. Adam Thielen's been their best pass catcher for the last couple of years. Great. He had a bit of a kind of late career renaissance, but that ain't setting you up moving forward. So I really like what they did. Ted McMillan at 8. If he'd have been gone before, they'd have probably taken a defensive player like maybe a Jalen Walker who ended up going later on. But when Ted McMillan was still there at 8, absolutely made sense to take him. I like the bookend with the round 6 wide receiver they took as well. Seen a lot of Jimmy Horn. I think he's going to be a really, really good contributor on offense. Not a lot of yards and a lot of catches for Colorado, but in key moments in games, it was Jimmy Horn that Shedeur went to, not always Travis Hunter. And he made big play after big play after big play for them. And he did the same at South USF, South Florida, when he was there as well. So I'm expecting him to be a real key contributor, as maybe wide receiver 4 that could be wide receiver 3. So really, really like that. And the 2 edge rushers, I think, are great value for them as well. So they've got a lot better in the space of 3 days. And Trevor Etienne maybe would have gone round 2, round 3. Did he not have the injuries he had at Georgia? And again, all of a sudden you've got a committee there. You're taking it off Chuba Hubbard a little bit. And then, maybe you're not having to run him into the ground. He got injured, he dealt with injuries late in the season. And you've got Dowdle and ETN as a bit of a change of pace. So, I think they're set up a lot better. And again, they're one that could improve quite a lot this year, with Bryce Young in his 3rd year. So, I really like what the Panthers did.
Yeah, and obviously they got Jalen Coker as well. So they've got a wide receiver room where it's lots of different kind of players. So that I think that, you got to give Bryce Young all these tools, because we went into last year saying, like, how is he going to get better when this is what he's working with? So, Bryce Young's got to continue where he ended last year. He needs to, take another step to be that, number 1 pick and be that guy long term. So why not try and put everything around him with this coaching staff there? I think it works out. And, the figure about the future, Jadeveon Clowney has only got 1 year. Get some of these youngsters to learn underneath him. I think Nick Scotton could take over the year after. They're probably going to play this year just because the level of talent they've got. But, it's setting up for the future with these picks as well. I think, especially 2nd, 3rd rounders, they're not all going to be day 1 contributors. It's thinking about where they're going to be in 2 or 3 years. So I think they set themselves up well. And I like what they've done. So, they're not going to be a playoff team, I don't think, or a Super Bowl team. But you've got to think long term and get these players in now without going a bit too crazy. They drafted up and gave plenty of draft capital for Bryce Young. So now it's keep going forward and improving, and not being back to square one.
And it wasn't just Jimmy Horn that was, family ties in the NFL. It was Musi Muhammad the third. Musi Muhammad, former Panthers wide receiver. His son came in as an undrafted free agent as well, which I love seeing those players come through. It makes you feel old, obviously. It's one of my earliest memories watching football was Musi Muhammad and the crowd cheering Moose, and me and our old friend Dan thinking they were booing him because he was Muslim in the after event of 9/11, and very pleased to be wrong on that one. Because I couldn't figure out who it was. We weren't big NFL watchers. We just knew they were booing a guy, and it was like something Muhammad. And it's like, oh shit, in hell, that's awful. And thankfully we were wrong. But it was nice to see his son get called up anyway. Excellent,
good stuff. Takes us nicely to my winner, because there was a little bit of a family connection during the draft for this one. Byron, I think you'll like this one as you're a fan of the team so much. I think the Seattle Seahawks had an incredible draft weekend. And the family tie there would be that obviously quarterback Jalen Milroe, his uncle, Sean Alexander, Seahawks legend, announced his draft pick in a pretty cool moment on Friday night. But it wasn't there, I think, where it started. Gray's able, O-line help they've needed. They've neglected the interior of the offensive line year after year, draft after draft. They finally caved. I think they got Zabel at good value. I was hoping that, with what the Cowboys did at 12, that it'd be Zabel instead of Booker. But they've got a good one in Zabel there. He's got experience playing all 5 offensive line positions. They've got a great starter on that O-line instantly. They then took the safety, Nick Amawari from South Carolina, who was talking about maybe would go ahead of Malachi Starks in the second round. Followed that up with who you thought might have snuck into the first round with one of your bets, Byron, Elijah Arroyo from Miami.
Yeah.
Obviously, they do have Noah Fant, but a second, tight end of kind of Arroyo's quality, is going to help them. They're going to have options maybe to play a lot of 12 personnel, maybe. We'll see. And then, Milroe just is worth talking about. So they got Sam Darnold in, and they've got an opportunity there for a couple of years to develop Jalen Milroe. And he certainly, of the quarterbacks, was the most athletic of them by far. We saw him do a lot of damage with his legs for Alabama. Inconsistent throwing the ball, but as a project, if you can get I don't even think Sam Darnold needs to play as well as he did for the majority of the year for the Vikings, for the Seahawks to be good next year. If you can just get Sam Darnold to be solid, then you've got the opportunity for the Seahawks to be good, to continue to win a lot of games. They've won 9 games, 10 games the last couple of years. We expect them to be around that again, maybe push on a little bit. But they've got somebody maybe in a couple of years' time in Milroe who could, take it off. He could be maybe everything the Colts wanted Anthony Richardson to be, and possibly a little bit more. And I love some of the other picks as well. Damian Martinez out of Miami is a running back option as well. And when you look at kind of Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, throw Damian Martinez into the mix as well. They've got a great 3-headed option there, I suppose. Yeah. We might call it monster. And I love the Notre Dame D lineman as well, D tackle D lineman, Riley Mills. So they've revamped the trenches. They picked up a couple of depth pieces later on as well. Got some help in on the O-line. Got a potential quarterback of the future. And got some difference makers from day one. I think Adam Warrior as well kind of fits in maybe to that little old Legion of Boom kind of style that they loved having so much in Seattle. Yeah, I absolutely love what the Seahawks did.
Yeah, and I know you say like one of my teams, and I thought coming into the draft, I might be parting ways with the Seahawks going into next season because I don't like Sam Darnold. I'm sure he's a nice lad, but
you personally hate him,
yeah. He seems fine. He's overcome adversity in the NFL. He had Adam Gase as a coach. He had Matt Rule as a coach. God bless him. How can you show your best? And he's doing well now, but he's on a 1-year contract. And then, I don't want to cheer for a team that has Sam Darnold at quarterback. I just don't like watching him, really. I think he needs to be really schemed to be at his best. And then Seattle coming after knock it out of the park. I couldn't agree more. I'm super intrigued by Jalen Milroe. I was intrigued going into the draft, obviously, because I'm not saying every player can learn to be Josh Allen. That's a silly comparison, but we always have to say it. But, it is possible to get more accurate in the NFL. It is possible. no player can become Jalen Milroe. Shedeur Sanders, Will Howard, they cannot become Jalen Milroe and be one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league day one. You can start Jalen Milroe in goal line packages today. You know, you talk about Walker, Charbonnet, Martinez. You can put Jalen Milroe on the field with any of them. With or without Sam Darnold, and you've got a different threat instantly. You know, take Sam Darnold out once you get to the 10. It's fine. Just let Milroe run the thing. I absolutely love it. I love that Darnold's on in a 1 year, and you've got this option to take a look at him. Elijah Arroyo fell because of injuries. I think by a lot of counts, he would have been a first rounder if he hadn't been injured. I think they absolutely smashed it. And one little fun shout out, Ricky White, the 7th round pick, he had more blocked punts last year than any school did. So I don't know what he's like as a wide receiver, but that was one of my favorite tidbits of the weekend that I've seen come out. And I just wanted to give another shout out, talking about Jalen Milroe and someone we will talk about soon in terms of different attitudes with the interview process. One of the teams asked about Milroe and a series of questions about what he was good at, went through what he's good at, and they said, what could you get better at? And his answer was, well, how much time do you have? And the team had said, are you not concerned pointing out these things is going to work against you? And the might concern us is like, you know, anybody who comes into this room who has never played in the NFL and says they've got it all figured out and hasn't got weaknesses is insulting your intelligence, because everybody has work to do. And it's like, okay, this is a kid who has his head screwed on right. Everything you read about him, he's a good leader. He's committed to his program. He works his ass off. Might he be a good thrower in the NFL? I think you'd wager probably not. But, you know, Tim Tebow won a playoff game. Anthony Richardson's got not a terrible winning record. There's plenty of these quarterbacks over the years who've not been sustainable passers, but can come in and win your games. And I don't see why Jalen Milroe can't do exactly that. Maybe not long term, but you know, he's being picked at pick 92, not picked at pick 2, pick 4 like Anthony Richardson was. I absolutely love it. I think that's the exact kind of pick you should take in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I really like it too. I think you've said most. If we go 3rd round, obviously the difference between him and Anthony Richardson is Richardson didn't play that much, so probably the coaches thought, you know, he can change, while, you know, Milroe's been at Alabama for 4 years with, you know, one of the best coaching staff in college, and if they've not made it to work, would that, you know, would someone in the NFL do it? I really like that, the Nick Emenwari one, because he feels like the kind of Cal Hamilton, the you know, Mike McDonald's defense style, having that hybrid safety who can hit hard but also cover, is what a lot of people say is the anti-Kyle Shanahan system, which stops them kind of teams, and you're going to have to stop them teams. Stop them teams in that division. Cool. Paul pops away. Byron, do you want to just we'll do some more quick winners. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So a team who I kind of thought might be replacing Seattle in my heart going into this year, and they also had Seattle's quarterback and took him, so it's not a surprise there really. I love Pete Carroll. I like what Las Vegas did in the draft. I think Pete Carroll came with an MO of like, we're not going to be soft, we're not going to be pushed around. Ashton Jennings might be a bit of a luxury pick at 6, but when you're getting one of the blue chip players in the draft, I think it's hard to say no to, and I think it sets a tone of what Pete Carroll likes to do on offense. They also have Chip Kelly on offense there as OC, who famously wants that ball snapped early, wants to call a ton of plays, has creative running game calls. So I think that's a great match of player and run scheme. They took Jack Betch in the 2nd round, who is a physical wide receiver. I think he's the most comped to Puka Nacua in the draft. Obviously, he's gone earlier than Puka, but I mean, if we know what Puka would have been, he wouldn't have went in the 5th round. He would have went in the 1st round. And then some O-line strength later on. And I think they've just positioned themselves to be ass kickers, essentially. They're going to come in, going to set up Pete Carroll's tempo of football. They ain't going to be pushed around next year. It's very, very tough division. I will say that. So it's tough to say, again, they're going to win the division or anything like that. Some divisions, I would probably pick them as a winner. You know, you put them in NFC South, probably, I'd be like, or AFC South. I think with Geno, an improved defensive line, Ashton Jennings, they could maybe do another receiving weapon, but if Betch hits out, I think that's doable. But yeah, I liked an awful lot of what Vegas did on the weekend. Who's your next winner?
Yeah, I'm going to go for the T-War. Feels like always drafts well, and it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think Jason Light is a very underrated decision maker. I don't think he gets the Howie Roseman, Ravens kind of pop where with what I picked. And I just like what they did. They only had 6 picks in the draft, but looking at most of the grades and look, in my opinion, most of them are like B and above. And I think that's what you're going to do in this draft. You just want to get some quality starters. And obviously, again, Egbuka in the first round, I know it was our wide receiver darling in there. And, it wasn't their glowing need. But again, it's a kind of organization we think about the future. Chris Godwin's coming off, second serious injury. We'll see how he plays. Mike Evans is on another 1-year contract and turning 32, 33. You need to replenish these players and, who's better to work under where, I can see Egbuka taking over from Godwin in a year's time. Even like next year, he might have a big role. Obviously, it doesn't help his fantasy outlook. But at 19, it feels like one of them players where the Bucs were like, if he's there, we're going to take him. Best player, that kind of thing. They've probably got needs elsewhere. I really like the Benjamin Morrison talking about father-son connections. His dad used to play with Todd Bowles. I don't know if you saw the video where Todd Bowles had to tell him, calm down, just to tell your dad hi. And I think that could be a steal. Obviously, he had an injury last year, and that affected his draft stock. But these are the players in the second, third rounds where you pick up, and you understand why they slipped, but they can be day one starters. We look at what the Eagles did at cornerback. And obviously, they double dipped as well again, Parrish. For the Kansas State, and it was an area of need. They got rid of Carlton Davis, and they are getting slightly older in that position. And then finally, again, David Walker. I think they needed another edge, and he's like one of them, Lord's College darlings where he had high production, but there was always the worry that he's not playing against the top level. But he had a good Senior Bowl, so the game in the 4th round, the 121 pick, he could be one of them steals where the Bucs just carry on, just getting, and in that division as well, I know, Panthers wasn't the biggest fan of the other two. I think with this draft, they can continue being that, the number one team. And there's a reason why when you've got a solid GM and head coach partnership.
Excellent. Cheers for covering there, guys. Appreciate you. Sometimes things don't always go to plan here at Good Teams when great teams come up. But I've got one more ahead. Shouts to Vegas, the Raiders and Bucs there as well. I've got one more winner. It's not necessarily a team. It's an individual. Robert Saleh. The Niners just fully committed to filling that defense with young talent. The first 5 draft picks and 6 in total, all on the defense. And I think Robert Saleh there might have the opportunity to do what he did last time for the San Francisco 49ers, take a load of these young players, develop them, turn them into a beast of a defense. I don't think he's going to be too long before he gets another crack at a head coaching job, because I'm fully expecting he'll do a great job here at the Niners. And he's got a lot of great young talent there to kind of sharpen and develop in the next 2 or 3 potential season or 2, and really get them moving in the right direction after kind of losing also a lot of personnel from the defense. Joe, how are you feeling? I think there's 5 great players there, and headlined by Michael Williams, who I think the Niners are going to absolutely love.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I was seeing like most grades of B's and C's for the 49ers. They've mentioned that they probably overreached for quite a few players. But they've said that about Ronaldo Green last year, 2nd round pick, and he's turned into a great cornerback for them. So I like what they did, and I like what's come out based on the first 3 picks is who they had in mind for them picks, and they just stuck with that. Obviously, Michael Williams is only 20 years old. Having that, having Saleh, the defensive line coach, is one of the best. So to work with him, and he's, they're trying to stop what their biggest weakness was last year was running. So obviously, Michael Williams can set the edge and stop that run. And then the 2 big boys in the middle, West and Alfred Collins, is, I think, great pickups. Hopefully, they can, again, progress and be able to get to the quarterback as well, which is not what their strengths, but they had to go with one of the biggest weakness. The linebacker, could have been a reach, but he's basically there to replace Drake Greenlaw. He's a similar kind of stature. He's not the biggest, but he's got these huge arms, similar to Greenlaw, and he hits hard. So Nick Martin. So we'll see. And I like Upton Stout. I just like the name. Again, they seem to get a lot of players who are, who hit big time. And the news came out, I don't know if you saw, just after the draft, Mustafa actually tore his ACL in the last game of the season. That literally just came out. And it's the same knee which he's hurt before. So the 49ers injury-plagued season continues into the draft as well. So they're having to look into that as well. So I think Stout could play nickel and they can move some players around. So I don't mind it. Like I said, I always think that after the third round, it's, you sit here and you think, wow, what a great pickup, and then they're not on the team that, I remember saying Jarrett Kingston, me and Byron were super excited. I was excited that the 49ers got him, and Byron was such a great pick, and he was on the Panthers later on in that year. So, yeah, I don't mind it. I like the draft. I'm glad that we didn't get a kicker. I would have liked to get a lot more offensive linemen. Our depth is not great, and we only picked up a guard in the 7th round. So that's my only worry coming out of it with everything else. So, yeah, can't complain. I've just got a few little winners, and I'll quickly go.
Can I just touch on your 49ers before you go on, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead.
So CJ West, I had a couple of little fun things about CJ West. He had the fastest 10-yard shuttle in his weight range at the combine. So players weighing 315 or above, he had the best burst. So exactly what you're looking for. And then much more in depth here. But so he went to Indiana. Their average depth of tackle against A-gap runs last season was 2.11 yards. The next closest team was 2.75. So to your point, that's a guy who's going to plug that fucking gap up and stuff you right inside. They only faced 85 such runs, which was 104th in the country, but they had 29 tackle for losses on no gain, which was 4th most in the country. This is a big boy who's going to fill that middle of your defense. I think that's a great value at 113. And Jordan James, 147, 5th rounder. I think that's just Jordan Mason 2.0. He was getting a lot of hype in fantasy circles before the draft. I think that's fell off with the landing spot and the late capital. But as a player, I mean, you could kind of just squint and you might think you're watching Jordan Mason, truthfully. So I think it's a perfect fill-in for, what you've just lost at, a much cheaper rate than what he got paid by Minnesota. So I think they've done a really good job. Doesn't really help Robert Saleh, the Jordan James one, but San Fran in itself. And that's all I had on CJ West anyway.
Yeah, cheers, man. Yeah, so a couple of the ones I like what the Cardinals did at the beginning. The Lions O-line, the guys they got in, I think that's making them solid. A few players, DeAndre Swift, he's probably coming out of this draft one of the happiest people, especially because they didn't get a big running back what everyone expected. So him in fantasy could be a good pickup. And anyone who's got CeeDee Lamb or plans to get CeeDee Lamb in fantasy, because who else are the Cowboys going to target? So yeah, how are you guys feeling with the Cowboys? I know they didn't address the wide receiver need, which was huge going into it when you look at that depth. And Turpin might be getting a few more touches, but I think they did good elsewhere, so I'll let you guys.
Yeah, I think they'll end up picking up somebody. Maybe that ends up getting cut or a trade of a mid-round pick again. Don't forget they've also got Jonathan Mingo. But yeah, no, I'm quite happy. Like I say, first three draft picks, I think Dallas did a real good job. Yeah. Tyler Booker, as much as I say it's a reach and I would prefer other options, he is going to be really good. Obviously, spoke so highly of, and Cowboys had keyed in on him. It's just the value I perceive it at. But I think he's still going to be a great player. They do need somebody to replace that man, ultimately. And Tyler Booker looks like he's going to be that man. Ezra Aku, I think, at 44 was great. I think he's ranked in comfortably inside the top 25 of most people's boards. Really like Ezra Aku. And again, they need somebody opposite Micah Parsons, and maybe he can fill that role that DeMarcus Lawrence had, after he's gone now to Seattle. And Ravel, I think it's just pending. Obviously, he has got the big injury, which is why he dropped, but they do need the depth in the secondary thing because they just can't seem to get Bland and Diggs together on the field at the same time often enough. They lost Jordan Lewis, who was there for 10 years as a staple of the slot and a real good, one of the top players in the NFL in that position for me. He was so consistent, and Ravel can kind of potentially help with that as well. Jaden Blue, I don't mind. He's like a bit of a change of pace, but I felt that maybe they needed to address it with the more physical runner. I'm real disappointed they didn't try and get Scatterbo, but I think once it got to that point, that's where the 4th round pick for Mingo hurt them. They didn't have the ability to go get him, and sadly he's with the Giants. And they got a couple of run stuffers near the end, took a flyer on Mathaf out of Clemson. And I really do like Shamar James, the linebacker out of Florida. So I think a real solid effort from Dallas. And a lot of them I'm expecting to contribute as rookies.
Yeah, I'll just throw a couple of late winners like Joe has as well. I don't have anything else to say on Dallas. I think you covered it really well, Paul. I think, first 3 picks, smashed it. Everything else, wait and see. Byron Sorrell, who was Green Bay's 122nd pick overall. If you haven't seen this, I would recommend just giving him a Twitter search and looking it out. He attended the draft all 3 days until he was picked, certainly, and got called out by the commissioner, came on stage and had his thing, got cheered by the Packers fans. I just thought it was a really cool thing for him to do. Like I said, turned up on night 1, stayed day 2, wait and see if and when he got picked. And he just, had his moment, which I think is very cool of him to do. He didn't think he was going day 1, but he went up anyway. And, you only get drafted once, so go and enjoy the weekend of it. Don't, pout and sulk if you don't go in the first day or day 2 even. I just thought it was very cool. And just the other one I want to shout out was, once again, Washington Commanders doing things the right way. Gabriel Taylor, Sean Taylor's brother, is in for rookie minicamp as a UDFA. So just a very cool touch. Obviously, Sean Taylor passed away, killed far too young. And I just thought it was a really cool moment for them to do that. So those are my 2, slightly off the wall winners, I guess. But I thought they were both very cool moments on the weekend.
Yeah, excellent. It was a draft filled with good moments, I think. We even had a couple of people who took part in our Fans on the Clock draft make picks live in Green Bay and 1 live in London. I know 1 live in Green Bay, 1 live in London, I should say, for the Ravens. And then we had Scott, who's Commanders International Fan of the Year, take part. And those are cool moments. I hope in some way that helped them kind of taking part in Fans on the Clock, prepare them for the moment. Absolutely. So who knows? Basically, what we're saying is if you take part in our Fans on the Clock draft in March, by April, you may be announcing a pick for your team at the NFL draft or on one of the many international calls that happens as well.
Yeah, I mean, the odds are in your favor.
Absolutely.
6% of our respondents made a pick at the NFL draft.
Excellent. Pretty cool. Maybe it's going to be us one day.
I'd expect so.
Yeah.
Call be coming one day.
Excellent. I suppose we should talk losers. I've only got 2, so I like to go first, just in case you 2 snipe me. Because, like I said, I think a lot of teams had good weekends, and we've probably not mentioned them all. I found it hard to split these 2, but I'll go with the one I think maybe who just edged it the worst. I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals. This is why I just don't really understand kind of where they're going. Obviously, defense is massive. It's what held them back last year. Burrow and the offense just put up points for fun and yards for fun, and the defense just couldn't stop a thing. And then they've taken an edge rusher with huge potential, but literally no production in college, in Shamar Stewart, who may turn out to be great. I feel there were so many other options there for you to get somebody much more solid, maybe one of the D tackles, one of the other edge rushers that's got more production. I understand the concerns with some of them, and maybe that puts you off. But 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons. With the physical traits that he has, my worry is if he couldn't get it done there when he had that advantage in college, how is he going to get it done in the NFL? And this might be one in a couple of years' time where he has a couple of quiet years to start and then all of a sudden explodes. But I don't think that's where the Bengals are right now. They need help, and they need help now. And just the rest of the draft wasn't particularly inspiring. They got some depth, I think, on the O-line. Running back, Taj Brooks, I feel like maybe they do need a bit of a better partner. Help me out, I forgot.
Chase Brown,
there we go. For Chase Brown, he obviously had an incredible year last year, but I feel like they could do balance. Maybe Brooks can be that person. I don't know. I know they got Khalil Herbert in back end of last year, but I felt the Bengals had so many more pressing needs, and I think they're coming away from that draft with not a lot. They've got a bit more depth at linebacker, but I don't think they've got difference makers on defense, and that's what they really needed.
And I think the problem is a lot of the players who are on that defense are wanting to get out as well. So obviously the Hendrickson, Jermaine Pratt apparently has requested a trade, so that's why maybe the second round pick of Knight Jr. they've reached and they got him early to try and cover that. But when you're a team what needs a lot and you're doing more needs than best player available, that's where they get into these issues. And they're just a weird team where do they actually get an edge rusher and develop them? I can't remember the last time they did. They drafted Miles Murphy 2 years ago, and he's not done too much the last 2 years. And he came out of college with a lot more production. So yeah, I just worry that it's not the right organization, and it's the first year. Got new defensive staff. Are they going to be able to change that around? Bengals was one of my losers as well, so I agree.
Excellent. Joe, do you want to go next, or Byron, whoever wants to jump?
I can go next. There's obviously the big elephant in the room, but we'll skip that for this. I'll let Byron take that. I'm going to go the Falcons. I wasn't a big fan of what the Falcons did in terms of what they gave up for Pierce, basically. I think that's such a huge commitment, and I've seen teams do this, and they're not an edge rusher away, and the two edge rushers they did get are very similar, very slight bodies kind of players. So to get 2 in the first round and giving up one next year, Penix Jr. ended the year well, but we don't know what he is yet. Is he again another quarterback? Is he going to be a franchise quarterback, or are they going to be back to square one? Obviously, his injuries history. So if they don't make the playoffs, then this pick's even worse, I think, because obviously next year could be a big draft. And you see teams like one of my other losers were the Vikings, but that was basically because they didn't have that many draft picks, and they did the same thing last year. It feels like this year they only picked that only one of the players is like a one-player draft, their first rounder, who's going to be a starter. But what they gave up for the edge rusher last year, I think I said last year I wasn't a big fan of that. So yeah, what the Falcons did, I just don't like giving up first-round picks. When you see a team like what the Giants did, obviously taking a punt on a quarterback, we'll see what happens. But they didn't give up the same capital, so I don't mind that. Giving away third rounders, it's not ideal. I wasn't a big fan of what the Lions did for Tesla, but to give a first round, I think that's a big steep for a team who hasn't made the playoffs in the last 7 years. Is it?
It's not a winning record for 7. I think it's 7 years in a row. They've had a losing record, haven't they? So
yeah, and it was like James Pierce was, and I'm like, it's a guy you have to get. That's what I'm just not the biggest fan of.
And especially, I think it looks daft as well because you saw the others drop. We saw so many of the others drop. Scouting, the Arkansas War, the Arkansas Ezeraku. You could have got another one of those guys.
Ualumu.
Yeah. Or maybe moved around in the second round, maybe, and it cost you a lot less. Yeah, I agree. For that reason, I was just splitting the Bengals and Falcons with my two. I think the redeeming bit for the Falcons, the 2 safeties they got, I like those. I think Xavier Watts will be really, really good. Playing with Jesse Bates, I think he'll be really, really strong. I like Billy Bowman as well. I think they'll find ways to get him involved in packages as well. So I like those 2 picks. But yeah, I think it was a bold move, and I think they've just pissed away that first round draft. James Pierce is going to have to be phenomenally good to justify that cost, and I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to get. He's going to be an instant 15 sacks a year guy. Probably not. Not many people are in the NFL. So yeah, I think that's how good he probably would need to be to maybe even start to justify that. I think it's a crazy, crazy decision. We talked about on draft night, like what the hell are they doing? Similar to last year, but Penix is probably going to work out. We'll see. I don't know, but yeah, it's bold.
They didn't give anything extra to take Penix.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah,
obviously they passed on other players.
Yeah,
but if they felt there was an issue with Kirk Cousins, then it looks like they were right. I hated the process of how they got to it, but they're probably right on Penix. It was wild, and I think I think in retrospect, the mistake was paying Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, not the drafting,
Not drafting Penix, but giving up. I could not believe they gave up that first. It was fun looking back at some of the tweets from the time of people I really like following. Hayden Winks is one of them, underdog. And it was just like, the Falcons have given up a first, really? Are they okay? It's like, I don't know another way to put it. Like, it felt like madness, especially, like Joe says, the Giants had just got what I thought was a pretty good deal done to get Jackson Dart. It wasn't, I expect you pay a first to go up there. No. I felt it was very reasonable, very surprising for New York. And then 2 seconds later, the Falcons were like, okay, fuck it, let's just throw everything in. And like you say, James Pierce he has to hit the ground running. And you're thinking, coming up to the draft on Fans on the Clock, not Fans on the Clock, GM charades, they turned down giving up a first-round pick for Trayvon Walker. So I wonder if they would prefer to have him than James Pierce. I'm sure they would. He's a double-digit sack guy. I'm not going to get into impressions now, though. So that is everybody's a winner on that front.
Yeah. I suppose by proxy as well, by talking about that, we've got to mention a win for the Rams as well as a winner, because I think it was that they've got that, in potentially a year next year when they might start to have a look at what life is like after Matthew Stafford. They're going to have 2 first-round picks in their back pocket, and they did okay getting a lot of depth. They're a really good team anyways. They didn't necessarily need huge injection of starters, but they've got a lot more depth, which will help an already pretty young team, except for Stafford. So, yeah, by proxy, Rams is a winner as well. But, yeah, Falcons, what are you doing? Alfred, the GM, and coach are for long there in Atlanta. Byron, yeah, I went first because the Bengals and Falcons were my 2, so I wanted to get one of them in. Byron, what about you? Who's your kind of loser?
Yeah, it is the elephant in the room, but I'm not going to say the player necessarily, but I think included kind of like a player and team. Like I said, it was Drake May and the Patriots. Shedeur Sanders we can get to, but I think Cleveland's draft was appalling. I've seen them get pretty good grades across the board on it, but I think it's appalling. You give up the opportunity to have Travis Hunter. Fair enough, you get an extra pick out of it and you get an extra first next year. That could be a very worthwhile pick. And if they're entirely tanking the year, then good for you, I guess. But, we have to talk about, like, this is hope season and everybody can win the Super Bowl today. And if your entire thing is that we're just going to be bad for a year, I hate that as a decision. Like, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have been there a long time. I don't think they should necessarily be in a position. They are picking second in the draft as well. Like, another season of just, it'll be better next year, hopefully, when we get a quarterback. All of their position picks outside of Mason Graham, I spoke during our live show. There's this chart over the cap put together of, like, essentially players that are available in free agency versus how much you have to pay them. And essentially all the players in the bottom right are quarterback, wide receiver, edge, tackle, players that you can't get in free agency and get paid a shit ton. And the Browns had one player in that quadrant, which was Mason Graham, which makes sense as a number 5 overall pick. Every other player and pick was in that top left, linebackers, running backs, tight ends. Yeah. I don't hate Harold Fanning himself as a pick, I must say, at 67, but I don't love it. I think it's fine. Schweinsteiger, sorry.
You wanted to say Schweinsteiger so
I did, yeah. Bastian Schweinsteiger at linebacker. Again, it's fine, but I just think it's not a value position and you're picking at 33. I think you could have got better capital trading back or just picking something else. Quinton Judkins, I don't hate, but I think he's a very one-dimensional runner. So was Nick Chubb, and Nick Chubb was the face of the franchise. So if it hits, I don't really quibble with that. But then why take Dylan Sampson? Yeah. I don't know. They didn't take a single wide receiver. On their starting depth chart on our lads, who I always trust as the best in the business, they couldn't have Jamari Thrash starting at right wide receiver. That isn't a team that's competing this year. They have 65 quarterbacks on the roster, I believe. Got Flacco, Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, Deshaun Watson will be on IR, but he's still on the roster. It's an absolute mess. There isn't anybody there that you think that's a 2026 starter.
No, I think that's from the issue, and I guess we will talk Shedeur a little bit. Yeah. But for those 5 picks in the top 100?
Yep.
I think they've made a mess of it. They had an opportunity there to set themselves up for possibly the next 5 years. Yep. And I think they've made an absolute pig's ear of it. Unbelievably, I think it's just waste.
It is waste.
And it is waste.
Even ignoring Shedeur Sanders as a storyline or anything else. And again, like, we've had plenty of discussions about him. I've always been higher on Dart than Shedeur. I didn't think Shedeur was a first-round talent. Some of the people I most respect who aren't connected to anybody, one had Shedeur as a fourth-round talent. One had him as a QB6 in this draft. I trust their opinions because I think there's been a little bit too much of the media involvement. I think Shedeur's fell because of they don't want the issues around him. But I also think he's been set up to succeed all his life. And that is what his dad and his coaches should be doing. But that doesn't make you a first-round talent. But what I don't get is I don't get take. Again, I'm trying to leave the Shedeur stuff to one side as we'll talk about more in depth. But I don't get taking Dillon Gabriel in round 3. I didn't see anybody have Dillon Gabriel as a top 100 player or round 3 player or a top 3 quarterback. I just don't understand it at all. And then presuming that was Berry's and Stefanski's pick, that surely means Shedeur wasn't at 140 because you don't take 2 quarterbacks within 50 picks of each other. Because what is Dillon Gabriel thinking going into camp now?
Yeah, I mean, especially not when you've already got Pickett and Flacco. I don't.
Yeah, and presumably one of them will be cut.
Yeah,
but it could be one of the rookies. It could be Pickett, it could be Flacco. I have no idea, but I don't think 2 days out from the draft we should be sitting here going, absolutely no idea what their plan is at quarterback.
Yeah,
like that is not healthy. And like you said, they had so many picks in the top 100, and to come away with just like, I have no idea what their plan is for this year or next year.
It was such a scattergun approach. It was such a scattergun approach. Yeah.
2 running backs, 2 quarterbacks. The entire thing, I think, relies on Jacksonville having the number 1 pick next year.
And
I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. At least the team was not a running back away from getting better. You know, that defense did drop last year, but they need to replenish that talent, you know. There's a reason why teams go up and down and they don't stay good forever. So, you know, I don't mind the linebacker they're taking second round, maybe a bit early. But yeah, I think it's just the Dillon Gabriel going quarterback. Because if they'd just gone Sanders in the 5th round, not Gabriel, I would have said, you know what, that's a great pickup. You know, I know you said some people you trust had him 4th round, but some other people had him, 5th overall pick or number 1, number two quarterback. So to get that in the 5th round, it is just a fly. 5th rounders, half of them will not make the roster the first year, and probably half of them afterwards are not making the following year. They've been the practice squad. So to get a quarterback who has the potential of being, top 15 at the 5th round would have been great. It's just the weird thing going Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, 94. Like if they went Sanders there again, I would have been like, you know what, fair enough. It's a good
worth a shot.
Yeah, why not? It's just that and I don't know if you've seen the video of the GM and the head coach when after the pick Sanders. It wasn't much celebrating. But then it feels like, is this just an owner's pick? And that's where you just worry about the Cleveland Browns. Is it Jimmy Haslam, butting in again and saying, "Oh, you need to draft this guy because he owns."
It's annoying because well, I mean, Jimmy Haslam is 0 for 2 on quarterbacks, Johnny Manziel and Deshaun Watson. I would bet he's going to go 0 for 3 because, like you said, 5th rounders don't work out. He might, but they don't, by and large. But when you said about Berry and Stefanski, it's really annoying because I can't remember the actual quote, but I think it was on the Heed the Call reaction. It might have been another show, but I think it was Heed the Call. And it was just like Berry and Stefanski were stood there, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it was essentially like, were stood there like 2 men who'd been asked to perform an autopsy. Like, that is how disinterested they looked. And that isn't how you should look when you've just drafted any player, but especially a quarterback. You should be hyped, you should be psyched. You shouldn't look morose.
Yeah. It is a bizarre one, and I mentioned in our chat, I think Shedeur can win that job. It sounds crazy, but Flacco's another year down the line. Flacco's another year down the line. We know what Kenny Pickett can do. Dillon Gabriel, he might make a career as a backup. Obviously, he's got another one similar to Bo Nix, where he just played at Colin College forever. Bo Nix obviously so much better.
I'm guessing the issue is that, like, how are they going to divvy up their snaps?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to have time to develop, are they? I suppose.
Yeah. That's what, and I meant to mention when I said live stream, we obviously got a guest on, and we're talking about the future and all of that kind of stuff. And we talked about, what the Jags did and everything. The one thing I found weird about the Browns is that if they go 3-14 again, which they could easily do with this roster and quarterback, Is Andrew Berry still going to be there? Is Kevin Stefanski going to be there? And I know he's had 2 head coaches of the year, but if they have a stinker like last year again, are they going to be there for that first round pick they've just given away and not taking Travis Hunter? That's the only thing I worry about the Browns. There's some other teams where it feels like who have done that, and you're like, yeah, they're set for the next year. You know, it's the Giants. It feels like that. You know, the head coach and GM, they've got that worry, but it feels like they're a bit more secure. It feels like the organization wants to stick out with them and give them that option to go Jackson Dart. But with the Browns, I feel like it's a bit more up in the air. So that's a bit of a gamble. So was it them who did it knowing that they're secure? Or again, was it Jimmy Haslam to be like, oh yeah, we'll do this? Yeah, that's the worry.
I think we were just there on Thursday when it was happening going, well, they've made this trade, they've given up Travis Hunter, but by doing that, look at what they've got. And actually, they're going to really be able to get a much more solid, rounded roster, and they've absolutely fucked it. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. And we also forgot to mention when we talked about the Falcons loser, obviously the story what's come out the last couple of days with the.
Well, I was going to mention it here.
Yeah,
I suppose. Obviously, Albright was the interim coach of the Jets, wasn't he, last year? Mm-hmm. Jeff Albright didn't particularly have a great run there, and then he's just fucking, leaking prospects, fucking mobile phone numbers unknowingly. It's like one of the MI5 leaving a top secret file on the tube.
To be fair, he'd be well set for a job in the US Defense Department, then, to be fair. Getting a signal chart and you'll be fine. We've banged some journalists in there, that'll be okay.
Yeah, and the apology that his kid issued was the most "I'm sorry I've been caught" apology I think I've seen in a long time.
With AI, just how to write an apology.
2 hilarious parts. One, he misspelled Shedeur Sanders' name. Secondly, someone did check it and it was 100% AI'd. Like, they put it through a generator. Was this done by AI? And it came back with 100% certainty this was done with AI. And also this, what's his name? Jax.
Yes.
Terrible name. He's 21. He's not 13.
Yeah.
And also, his bit was appalling. It was like, oh, it's Mickey Loomis here. Hello. Yeah. Oh, hang up. At least have the balls to be like, hey, we're getting rid of that pussy Derek Carr. Don't you think he sucks? Do something good with it. To just be like, hey, Mickey Loomis, bye.
And it's also they recorded it. How do they think they were going to get away with it? I don't think it was him on the phone. I think it was his friend, apparently, and he was in the video. But it's just a bit
you are brain.
It's just a bit nuts, and obviously that's gonna. Well, I'm curious what will happen. Is it something where the Falcons have to forfeit a 7th round pick or something like that? But
I've already forfeited the 1st round one, so.
Yeah. All missing pranks have not had a good couple of months on the internet. I'm sure you'll be able to find out that other one if you go look for it. I don't want to get sued, so we should maybe not talk about it. Messing the Browns. I think Shedeur's actually, weirdly, I thought maybe he wasn't starting to deal with it very well on Thursday. As the weekend went on, I thought he dealt with his slide on what Deion didn't. Deion had a meltdown, but I thought Shedeur did. And that's horrible, right? Thinking about it, whatever about you think about the celebrity, all that must be horrible. As anybody who's been potentially projected, I know there's different views on him, but a lot again, your Kuipers, Daniel Jeremiah's, etc., had him as a top 20 prospect. Has anybody slid that far before without killing anybody? Has anybody slid that far before?
Well, I would say the only comp is where Will Levis was just before the draft started, he was suddenly coming out that he was going to be the 3rd pick of the draft. And we talk about big draft moments. We just talked about Aaron Rodgers. Me and Byron was on the Andy's podcast the other week, and it's that was a huge story. He only slipped from number 1 to mid-20s. It wasn't it wasn't going 3rd overall pick of start of last college year. It was mocked to go 1st. To go from that to the 5th rounder must be the biggest slide.
Yeah.
Without anything coming out, without being something crazy off the field.
The nearest one that I can think of, which was a crazy off the field thing, was Lyle Collins. I'm not sure if you recall that. So in 2016, I believe he was drafted. Might have been 2015. He was meant to be a 1st round pick. Great talent. I think he went to LSU. I might be wrong, but a woman that he'd previously had a relationship was murdered. He was not a suspect, but teams weren't super confident on it. His agent came out and said, if you don't draft him in the first round, don't draft him. We're going to go as an undrafted free agent if he's not going in the first round. And he didn't. But that wasn't really a fall because that was very public. But that's the only thing that came to mind as like a similar level of player going. I mean, what did he go? 144. It doesn't happen. It just does not happen.
I'm curious some of the articles are going to come out why this has happened. I know there's been a few. I hate the ones where it's like an assistant GM not putting his name on it, like saying I interviewed. But yeah, I always think stuff like that's like put your name on it if you're willing to do that. If you're willing to ruin a kid's draft chances, put your name to it, and that kind of stuff. And then I saw somewhere it's like, oh, it made me feel small. Some like executives, that way you should be in the NFL if a 21-year kid who's going to be super confident because you've got to be that confident to be a quarterback makes you feel that way. It's like, well, maybe don't be in the NFL because most NFL players have that self-belief. So.
You need it.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you do need as well is, I talked about earlier, like Jalen Milroe's approach of humble yourself, go in there and be a learner, especially. Maybe Shedeur doesn't think that's his skill set, and maybe he'll be right. Maybe he will be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I'm not Nostradamus, you know what I mean? Don't think anybody of us was calling Brock Purdy a future $50 million a year quarterback. But especially if you're not a guaranteed starter and not a guaranteed top level player, you need to be coachable. There's a reason that like Charlie Whitehurst, Chase Daniel, these quarterbacks who are not top level players stick around the league forever because they're coachable. They can hold a clipboard. They're good in the locker room. They're not a drama. They're not a distraction. I think, again, it's hard to trust what you read to a lot of it, but I think with a lot of it, there is an element of truth as well. Like Shedeur Sanders, they put like deliberate mistakes in the playbook and it's something they do for everybody. And he just didn't call it. He just said like, the playbook was good or whatever, And, for that, again, if you're not a starting level quarterback, teams are just going to take you off the board because you're not taking it seriously. And like, you wouldn't turn up to a job interview unprepared, or you shouldn't if you want to get the job. And I
agree. I agree with that. I'm guessing the issue is he probably came in thinking he was going to be a starting quarterback. I think we all did, so I'm guessing that's the issue. And it feels like this year was the least amount of NFL teams needing a quarterback. There was teams who needed one, but they're like happy to wait for next year, or they're going to get some. There's still a few. Aaron Rodgers to the Steelers, for example. So there wasn't as many teams willing to just take that gamble for him to be the starter. I think once, the Saints, Giants, and Steelers and Browns were in for him at the beginning.
Wait, to be fair.
Yeah. But once they didn't take him in the first or second round, then I was like, oh, shit, like, who is going to take him as a backup?
Yeah.
That was the problem, I think, that contributed to him sliding that much.
Well, teams don't want to spend, like, once it wasn't, someone wasn't going to take him as a starter, teams just don't, apart from the Browns with their third pick, or second, third round pick to take Gabriel, they don't take backups with their D. It's kind of fourth, fifth onwards. But look, we've had those mid-round picks, like, I don't think any of us foresaw how Dak Prescott was going to work out, whether you love him or you hate him. He's a really great NFL starting quarterback for a full year.
If he plays 2 more years, he's going to be the all-time leader in yards and touchdowns for the Dallas Cowboys. That is smashing it.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins, another one out the fourth round, the career he's had. Brock Purdy, you've just mentioned, is going to become one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league as Mr. Relevant. So look, who knows? But I think he's going to start games. Right. Sorry?
Tom Brady did okay.
Yeah, Tom Brady did okay, yeah. I think Shedeur's going to get starts for the Browns. I'm going to take when I see it, because it will come out, who Browns start will be week 1. I'm going to take a punt on Shedeur, but I think at some point during the season he's going to get that job. And best of luck to him. A lot to talk about the Browns there. Any other losers? Shots, I've got one. Russell Wilson. I think he's a loser. He's turned up there at the Giants, and they've already got the guy breathing down his neck. Jameis Winston will breathe down his neck as well. I just think he's in another real shit situation again. Russell Wilson. So I feel a little bit sorry for him. But I think he's definitely a loser. Any other losers for you guys?
Yeah, I don't feel that sorry for him. He's play a decent check and play better if you want to be the main starting one. I've got annual Saints hate is coming here. I'm not a huge fan of going Tyler Shough that second round, and basically we've just talked about Derek Carr, and that's your, next year's plan is to go Tyler Shough, who's, an old quarterback with plenty of injuries. So not sure about that. I've got kickers and punters. First time none of them's been drafted in the top 5 since 2014. So the kickers punters club is certainly been, well, it's not surprising with some of the high picks, which have not worked out. And finally, John Harbaugh. I think I mentioned this when in our group chat, that when the Browns took Deshaun Watson, he was all there being high and mighty, being we've got a no policy in terms of sexual assault and all that kind of stuff, but it's happy to keep Tucker and then draft Green, which I don't know the ins and outs of that, all that kind of stuff, but it's just funny when he's trying to be above it and being like, oh, the nice guy, and we've got, and then when this took us, when it's one of his players and it's one of the best players of position, it's suddenly, oh no, we actually didn't put anything in place. It's a bit like, okay, so I get NFL teams don't get that, but don't try and be, don't speak out both sides of your mouth and try and be like the good guy in a situation when you're just like the rest of the 31 teams where they don't really care about that stuff.
Yeah. Excellent. Byron, any last loser or losers?
No, I'm going to keep it positive. I've done the Browns, bury the Browns, but no one else usually comes to mind. I think you've covered a lot of them, so.
Yeah. Excellent. There's probably some other winners and lots of teams had good drafts, but yeah, we can't talk about them all, otherwise we'll be here forever. That wraps up our NFL Draft 2025 winners and losers episode. I suppose last big event in the off-season for a while, I think, up until Aaron Rodgers signed with the Steelers, I guess. Pretty much the only other thing left to be resolved. And then I suppose we'll be heading into our previews. But we've got plenty of division previews. We've got plenty of content coming up to keep you entertained through the end of spring and summer months. First up, we've got an interview next week with Barney Short from the NFL Academy, another one of the prospects up in Loughborough. That'll be coming out next week. And then we've got our NFL Mastermind series kicking off. 16 of the greatest minds in NFL content creation, UK and Ireland NFL content creation, putting their knowledge to the test. Questions that I've written, so we'll see. 4 heats and a grand final at some point. So yeah, a little bit of trivia for good teams and great teams cover, something different that we've not really dipped our toe in before. So we'll see how that goes, but looking forward to getting all that recorded and out. And that should then take us into our division previews, which will start, I suppose, at the start of summer. But Byron, Joe, pleasure as always. Good stuff. Great draft weekend. Make sure you go follow the show if you're not already. If you're listening and watching, I'm sure you already are. But you can audio version of the pod available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Overcast. Video version available on YouTube, and follow along on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at GTW_GTC. Until next time, thanks very much.